stance of the Morrison government on top of the CCP infiltration in Australia right now?
I think they've decided quite clearly that they will take a firm approach against CCP influence activities. I think we're seeing it across the ministry, across the bureaucracy, spreading not just into the security agencies, but also into defence. The Department of Foreign Affairs is kind of a weak link in all of this, unfortunately, but the Minister for Foreign Affairs has taken a very firm position that Australia will not succumb to economic threats and blackmail anymore, and will stand up for our interests, even if it's going to cost us economically. So I think the Morrison government is taking, and I'm not someone who's sympathetic towards the Morrison government at all. I come from the other side of the political spectrum, but I do think that the Morrison government is handling the China pushback issue in a sensible, calm, firm way, a way that I think other nations will be copying in the near future.
Apart from economics, the CCP has been trying to infiltrate different aspects of the Australian life, such as the academic side. We're seeing they have set up so many different Confucius Institute in high schools, universities across the country. What's the role in promoting the CCP's agenda and propaganda apart from education with the use of Confucius Institute?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. And it varies between institutes to some degree. If we take the Confucius Institute at the University of Queensland, for example, we can see it's very active in a range of areas well beyond teaching Chinese language and culture. It is, for example, very active in technology exchange, perhaps even technology theft. I don't think it's been investigated. There are a lot of people from China who are members of staff at the Confucius Institute there who have nothing to do with language teaching and culture. They are technology and engineering experts. Well, what are they doing there? The Confucius Institute has also played a role in formulating a course on kind of China studies, which is now part of the mainstream economics curriculum at the university. And it's clearly a propaganda course promoting Beijing's worldview on all kinds of things. I mean, that simply shouldn't be happening, but it's part of the spread of propaganda. In other countries, in Europe, for example, Chinese nationals working at Confucius Institutes have been charged with spying. So they appear to be using the Confucius Institutes as kind of cover for their spying activity. And so I think this all goes to show that the surface story, the superficial story told about Confucius Institutes, just the innocent promotion of language and culture, is really, to some degree at least, a front for a much deeper set of activities that are associated with spreading CCP influence and even espionage in certain countries.
All right, so just now we have talked about, actually it's not just only for Australia, actually the CCP infiltration or the influence is all over the world. Like, for example, the Confucius Institute is not only in Australia, it's in the US and everywhere. So how would you actually anticipate the future developments of the CCP or its influence in terms of the strength and its tactics?
Well, it's worth noting that in the United States and to some degree in Canada, but especially the United States, there have been dozens of Confucius Institutes that have been closed down over the last couple of years as more and more universities, sometimes under pressure from the federal government, realise that having these institutes on campus is not in their interests, that they're not as innocent as they may appear, and so they're shutting them down. And I think we'll see more and more of that. I think the environment for Beijing will become less friendly And of course, Beijing is kind of playing into that with its so-called wolf warrior diplomacy and more aggressive threats and attacks. For example, what it's doing in Australia. So, there's this kind of contradiction. On the one hand, Australian universities, and with the support of governments at some points, are, actively promoting people-to-people exchanges and friendship and so on between the Australian and Chinese people by having Confucius institutes and other kinds of cultural exchanges. But then Beijing is engaged in this really quite a brutal attack on Australia and our sovereignty with these threats and trade sanctions and claims about Australia as being irredeemably racist and dangerous for people of Chinese heritage. So there's a kind of real contradiction going on here, which can't be sustained. And many Australian people are very angry about the way the CCP has tried to bully Australia and influence our institutions. So it's a very fluid situation. The CCP has lost a huge amount of ground in propaganda terms over the last 6 months and really 18 months. I'm thinking 6 months with coronavirus and 18 months if you think about what's been happening in Hong Kong as well. And so it's hard at this stage because it's such a kind of chaotic situation geopolitically to see how things might evolve. But at the moment, things are pretty tough for Beijing, and that's good to see.
Yeah, you've mentioned that the Confucius Institute at UQ play a huge role in promoting the CCP's agenda. So talking about UQ, I knew that you've been to UQ to make a speech last year, but UQ has been a really pro-Beijing nowadays, I would say. Peter Hoyle, the vice chancellor of UQ, has been taking like 200 grand of bonus for promoting CCP, for building a stronger relation with the Chinese Communist Party. And we've seen that they tried to kick UQ Senator Drew Pavel out of UQ for his statement for supporting Hong Kong. How would you comment on this? Like, is this a real and threatening situation already, and which is getting through into UQ, getting through into Australia already?
Oh, yes, I think the Drew Pavlou case is one of the great academic scandals that we've ever seen in Australia, because here we have a lone 20-year-old, I think now 21-year-old undergraduate student who has pointed out the close links between UQ and the Chinese Communist Party and its various agencies and the Consul General in Brisbane. And he has enraged the university by his truth-telling so much that they're trying to crush him, kick him out of the university, take him to court, basically intimidate and cause him so much trouble that he'll leave the university. And so they're really trying to shut down free speech in the form of criticism of the CCP, and they're doing so in order to keep Beijing happy. I think that's a very blunt way of summing up the situation, but I think that's actually how it is. And it's a kind of tragedy for not just for Drew Pavlou and for Hong Kong democracy supporters at the University of Queensland. It's also a tragedy for the whole idea of academic freedom in Australia. And the university has a lot to answer for. And I've noticed that here in Canberra, some very senior politicians, including the minister himself, have taken a strong interest in what UQ is doing. They obviously don't like it at all. And so UQ is torn between keeping the minister and others happy in Canberra and keeping their friends in Beijing happy. And so far, they've decided they would prefer to keep their friends in Beijing happy. And I think that's going to cause a great deal of pain for the university. It's a bad mistake.